Welcome back to another episode of the Girls Talk Money podcast. You guys loved our first 25 lessons we've learned by 25 episodes. We're back with part two. These episodes are so fun to film, and I feel like we could do so many more of these on more specific topics like money or dating or friendship. But in this episode, we're continuing on with 10 or so more life lessons. We have some good ones on the list today, so I'm excited to get into them. We are so excited to announce that Girls Talk Money is going international. In February of 2025, we're hosting an international group trip and retreat to Colombia with EF Ultimate Break. If you've never traveled with EF Ultimate Break before or have never taken a group trip before, think 1 week surrounded by 20 to 40 like-minded women that can truly become your best friends. I've taken countless group trips in my life, and it is the perfect way to travel more even if you don't have anyone to travel with or if planning trips and figuring out the logistics of the trip stresses you out. In Colombia, we're having a week of sightseeing, beaches, boats, and of course building a community of like-minded women, which we could not be more excited about. If you want to see the full trip itinerary, learn more, or book the trip, we'll put the link in the show notes. Now let's get back to the episode.
I loved this style episode where we just kind of each come with our own unique advice and bring it to people. I always wish that I had a sister that I could give that big sister advice to, because I always appreciate it when some of my older friends give me that big sister advice. And this is what this episode feels like, and part one, where it's we can take all of the big sis life advice that we have gathered and give it to you all in this episode. And I was so glad that everyone loved the first episode. I was like, oh, because I wanted to do a part two, of course. We have so much more to share.
Yeah, these episodes are really fun. I do have a big sister, but she's actually 18 years older than me. So I feel like it was never the dynamic of getting the big sister life advice from her because there's such a big age gap. But I have been told by my friends that even though I'm younger than a lot of my friends, a lot of them come to me for advice. And I feel like I'm giving them big sister life advice all the time. If any of them are listening to this, they're gonna laugh when I say that. But I just think it's kind of funny. So we love talking advice. We love talking kind of life lessons, just reflecting on some of the things we've learned so far in our 20s. But Grace, do you want to kick us off with the first thing on your list?
Yes, I actually meant to mention this one in the last episode, but we had just gapped so long. We were we're gonna have to make a part two. And I said to Erin before we got on, I was I want to make sure that I say this because this has been the number one piece of life advice or just thing I have learned in the last, I would say it's only been about a year. I think I've talked about this a little bit on my social media, but right around this time last year, so probably or maybe even sooner, maybe May of last year, so May of 2023, I was going through it. My health was really bad at that time. I hadn't found my gluten allergy yet. It was kind of when my health hit the its lowest, it was awful. And when you're struggling with something like that, having the undiagnosed gluten allergy was giving me mental health issues. It was, my brain could literally not function properly. So I was very depressed. I was anxious, and I started working with a therapist. And I'm a huge, huge supporter of therapy. I love my therapist. I'm working with her for a year now. She is my girl. Love Jen. I said to my friends, I'm oh, I was talking to my girl Jen. I just literally love her. She has changed my life in so many ways. And in therapy at the time, I was struggling with everything: my health, my mental health, my confidence, my just I was fatigued. I wasn't sleeping well. I was literally falling apart. And it's crazy to think about and look back because me now I'm completely different. My life has made an entire 180 in the last year. And one of the things that made a really, really big difference in my life was realizing that what you say to yourself and the input that you allow to enter your energetic field and your mind are so, so important. And I'm going to give a little neuroscience lesson here because that was what really made it click for me and made me realize it is important, because I think everybody knows it's oh yeah, what I say about myself and the world around me matters. It's whoop-de-doo, but it really does. So you have two parts of your brain. One is your subconscious and one is your conscious. Your subconscious brain is about 90% and your conscious is about 10%. Your subconscious is where your beliefs are stored. So any beliefs that you have about what you're capable of and who you are and the world around you, whatever it is, that's where those are stored. And again, that makes up 90% of your brain. So if you have limiting beliefs, those are going to impact your decision making because we make so many decisions on autopilot in our subconscious where those beliefs are stored make up so much of our brain. So when you're going about life, if you have a belief that like people suck, this is one I see all the time and it pisses me off because I love people. I love strangers. I think strangers are so cute. Like, you just see, like, I was in San Diego this past weekend. There was a girl sitting on a bench. I was going for a walk with my friend. This is a side story, but it was so wholesome. She's sitting by herself on a bench with headphones on, and she's like, it's like a da 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 da, just like singing and literally like bobbing her head, waving her arms. And I was like, I love you. Like, girl, I'm like, you are just so full of joy, living your best life out there. Like, I was like, I love strangers. Other people would be like, strangers are so annoying. That's so weird. Like, whatever. Because a lot of people have this belief that people suck and they're never as nice as they seem and all of this, right? If that's a belief that you have about people, as you navigate the world and you're making decisions on autopilot, that belief is going to dictate a lot of your decisions. You might not thank somebody for holding the door for you because you're like, like they couldn't be that nice. Or maybe like somebody comes up to you to introduce themselves to you and your brain automatically assumes that they're not a good person. They're coming up to you to get something from you rather than to just compliment your outfit or whatever it is. And that is crazy when you really think about it. You're like, oh my God, these beliefs that I have changed. And the thing is for me, this was a lot around money and a lot around like body image. So I would feel like I never had enough money. And that led me to be in the scarcity mindset and to hoard extra money, and to basically live like I was making a fraction of what I was making. And that was obviously causing myself a lot more stress. I was saying no to things that I, didn't need to say no to, like going out with friends, things like that, because I had this belief that I was never going to have enough. And if I didn't hoard my cash, something was going to like, I would be unprepared and something bad would happen or whatever. And with body image, I had the same kind of belief that my body was never going to be enough. It wasn't enough as it was. It didn't look how it should, like all these things. And that it made my energy so yucky, for lack of a better word. Like I was so insecure and that energy just bled into everything in my life. But also it impacted dating because I was showing up feeling like I had to impress or that I had to prove myself or things like that. And one of the ways to rewire these thoughts, right, is to change them is through repetition, because our brains don't know the difference really between negative and positive. So if you're saying something, this was like the most, like the coolest thing I learned, because I took a manifestation and neuroscience course last year, and that's where I learned all this. But so if you're saying something like people suck, people suck, people suck over and over and over again, your brain doesn't know that that's a negative thing that you're saying. The same way that if you say like people are kind, like whatever, your brain just says, well, we've said it a million times, so it must be important. And your brain starts to store that as a belief. So the beliefs that you have in your brain are things that likely have been taught to you over and over and over again, or that you've said to yourself. And some of those come from family and things like that. Like, we'll never have enough, we can't afford that, things like that are big money ones. So to rewire it, you have to give that repetition, but in the opposite direction of whatever that limiting belief is. So you say the opposite of the limiting belief. And this is why affirmations are so important. And this goes back to what I was saying at the beginning with therapy. My therapist was like, have you done affirmations? I was like, Jen, don't play me. Like, I was like, no. Like, I'm not sitting in front of a mirror being like, you are beautiful. I'm like, no, that sounds so stupid. You know what I mean? I was like, this, because I always thought it was dumb. Whenever a therapist would recommend it to me, I'm like, you've got to be out of your damn mind. I'm not doing that. That's corny. But I realized this is why it is so important, because you're actively trying to rewire those beliefs through repetition. And an affirmation is only going to feel uncomfortable to say if it's something that you don't believe, because you feel like you're lying. Like when I started doing these a year ago, I would be like, I'm capable of anything and everything I set my mind to. And I would cringe. My skin would literally crawl. And I'm like, this is embarrassing. Now I can say that statement with no problem because I believe it to be true. But it felt weird to me because I felt like I was lying. Certain things that I like to do, like different affirmations. If I have this belief, I used to have this belief that I have to work hard and work more hours in order to build wealth, which isn't true. So I would work myself into the ground with the idea that like, well, it's all in the name of building wealth. And so I would do the affirmation, if other people can build wealth working a few hours a week, so can I, because I didn't believe that to be true for a while. Now I do. I used to believe that I will never feel more confident and I'm just not like worthy of feeling like a really confident version of myself. So I would say I'm beautiful exactly as I am and I'm worthy of feeling confident simply because I am. I don't have to earn the right to feel worthy. And then the one that I see a lot of women say and that really pisses me off is all men suck. People say, all men suck, all men suck. And here's the thing, when you say that, you're creating a belief in your head that all men suck, which then primes your brain to confirm that belief because our brains want to keep us safe. So it's going to look for ways to confirm the beliefs we have. It's going to look, you're literally priming your brain to pay more attention to shitty men than good men. And so you can use the affirmation, there are millions of incredible men and I'm capable of attracting one I could build my dream life with. Because when you change the limiting beliefs that you have, it changes the way that you view the world around you, and your brain becomes primed to look for things that validate those beliefs because, again, your brain's job is to keep you safe. So I'm really intense about this. Like, I won't even sing song lyrics that say mean things about myself. There's this song, I forget who it's by, but I love the song, and one of the lines is it says like, I think it's called Special by SZA, and she says like, I gave all my special away to a loser and now I'm just a loser. And I will not, I love that song, I will not sing the line that I am a loser because I'm like, no, like I'm not going
Yeah.
to say anything negative about myself. But that's a very long-winded thing, but that's like my biggest life lesson that I've learned is like what you say to yourself matters so much more than you even think. And genuinely practicing affirmations has completely changed my life. Like, so many of the limiting beliefs and struggles that I had are not even things I struggle with anymore because I've been intentional about rewiring them.
Totally agree. We should do an entire podcast episode on this because I feel like there's
We
so much to
should.
unpack here. And I think that what you said at the beginning about how like your therapist would recommend this to you and you just like kind of thought it was stupid and you're like, okay, that's so cringy. I'm not gonna like stand in the mirror and talk to myself. That's so weird. I think that's how most people view it. I know I viewed it that way for the longest time, but a few kind of like thoughts on that. So first, the example with all men suck. I really like what you said about how when you have that mindset, your brain is going to pay attention to the shitty men because, like you said, it's trying to confirm what you believe to be true because that keeps you safe. That is so true. I feel like I know so many people that have that mindset, and I have the total opposite mindset. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and I have been in so many great relationships with like so many great guys. It's like, just kind of believing that to be true, you're paying attention to the people that don't suck because that's what you
Mm-hmm.
believe. The second part on that is I think when it comes to affirmations, getting yourself to a place where you're really focusing on what you're saying or writing. And I think that
Mm-hmm.
this is where journaling becomes really important. And if you can journal and write down your affirmations kind of like simultaneously, this is why it's so important because you made a comment about how we live like most of our life on autopilot. Our brain is working very subconsciously. And for the most part, we're just kind of like going about our day, our day to day routines. Our life looks very monotonous day to day. So our brain isn't working that hard most of the time. So getting to a point where when you're saying those affirmations, you're doing something that is forcing your brain to focus on what you're saying or writing. So when you're journaling, the biggest reason why journaling is so impactful and so important is because your hand cannot write as fast as your brain can think. So when you're writing something down on paper, it's forcing your brain to really think about those words significantly more than if you're just saying them in your head because you're physically spending more time on those words. So I've been journaling so much more in 2024 and it has been so impactful for me. Before that, I was like, journaling is so stupid. And I used to get frustrated over the
Mm-hmm.
fact that I couldn't write fast enough to keep up with my brain. And that's why I wouldn't journal. But once I learned that, I was like, oh my gosh, that makes so much sense. Like, that's the point, is that you're forcing yourself to spend more time on the things that matter because at the end of the day, you get to decide what you journal. You can journal about shitty things and you can journal about how your life sucks, or you can decide to write down those affirmations. You can decide to write down what's positive in your life and kind of focus on that and spend more time and energy on that. Another
Mm-hmm.
tip that I heard, and I think that this is like genius because again, we spend most of our life on autopilot. We're like doing very monotonous things. What can you switch up about your routine and simultaneously say those affirmations? So I heard this in a podcast, and the girl was saying that every morning she brushes her teeth like with her right hand, right? She's like, I'm right handed. I brush my teeth with my right hand. She was like, I switch my hand and force myself to brush my teeth with my non dominant hand. And while I'm doing that, I say my affirmations in the mirror. And she was like, doing that, like, you're doing something uncomfortable because you're like not that coordinated with your non-dominant hands. You're like trying to brush your teeth. So you're really focused and like bringing kind of like your energy and what's on your mind is like bringing to like kind of like coming to the forefront of your brain. So I thought that was really genius, but we should do an entire podcast episode on affirmations and speaking to yourself kindly and all of those things, because it honestly is such a game changer.
We really should. I have a friend who was a neuroscience major in college. She came on our podcast, Taryn, and she had said something about journaling and how, like, because I used to be like, no, I'm just going to type out my journal. I'm going to journal on my laptop. And she would always push me to write it down. And I'd be like, enough. Like, why do I need to write it down? It's not that important. But then she told me that it's about the neural connections. Like, when you're physically like writing something down, something happens in your brain. I'm not a neuroscience person, but I mean, I'm a neuroscience person, but I'm a neuroscience and like the woo woo spiritual side of things. She was like neuroscience, like she was in it when she was in college. But like it changes like with the neural connections. I will say, for anyone who's listening to this and they're like, okay, I want to start journaling and doing affirmations, like how do I go about getting started? What I do is I don't use like one of those journal books that like has a question for you every day, because sometimes it would literally be like, I just had the best Tuesday of my life and the question of the day would be like, what is your deepest, darkest trauma? Please divulge. I'm like, oh, I just had such a good day.
I don't want to write about that.
Yeah, I was like, geez, Louise, like hell no. So I literally just have a blank notebook that I got on Amazon, and every day I write the day of the week and the date, and then I write I'm grateful for, and I make a list of things I'm grateful for. I don't have a specific number. I'm not like you have to force 5, because if you try to force like, oh, I have to do 3 or I have to whatever, you're going to naturally end up writing things that you're actually not actively grateful for. And that does nothing to solidify that gratitude for that thing. So some days when I've just had a horrible day, I'm like, I'm grateful I have a roof over my head and nothing else right now, you know? But then some days I have like better days where I'm like, oh my God, I'm grateful for the way the sun feels on my skin, and I'm grateful for this and that. Like, and I just have like a huge list of gratitude. And then I usually just do one paragraph about how I'm feeling in that moment. Like it could be like a positive emotion, a negative emotion, just like whatever. And then I write down my affirmations, and I just make the affirmation something that I'm working on in that moment. So I have been like the past couple months, I've been struggling with believing that like people care about what I say on social media. Like I'm like, why would anyone care enough that my page would grow? And so I've been working on an affirmation with that. And I will say my page has been growing, and I've been getting so many great messages, and I'm like, it's working. I'm starting to attract better energy. But then I read each affirmation aloud 3 times, and I put it on my nightstand right next to my bed. So I can't go to bed without seeing the notebook. So I remember to do it. And habit stack. We should do we have to do a whole episode on this.
Yeah,
like,
because I can continue talking about this too.
I know,
so
right?
we will revisit, I promise, in the near future. But let's get into the first one on my list. I love this one so much, and I was just talking to a friend about this, so I can give you like kind of an example on how this applies. But the first one on my list is your 20s are about trying a ton of different things, and you can't think about things that you started and then didn't follow through with as wasted time. I feel like I used to always catch myself like having an idea in my head, and like I'm a type of person where if I have an idea, I get really excited about it and I want to start executing on it, right? Which is great. Like you obviously, if you have an idea, the only way that an idea is a good idea is if it gets executed. But I would always find myself being like, okay, well, I don't want to spend all of this time executing on an idea without knowing if it's going to come to fruition, or without knowing if I'm going to follow through with it, because then all of the time spent on it is wasted time. And the conversation that I was having with a friend the other day, it was in relation to, she actually got a book deal. She she got a book deal, right? So she's writing a book, and I was asking her how the book process was going, and she was like, honestly, it's like really hard because you sit down and you have like you have to write 280 pages, and you just wrote the first 2 pages. Like it's very overwhelming, right? And it feels like I'm spending all of this time, and then what if it actually doesn't like come to fruition? And I feel like when you get the book deal, like you kind of already know it's going to come to fruition. But let's say you don't have a book deal, but you've always wanted to write a book, right? And you spend hours and hours writing the first 20 pages, and then you don't do anything with it. I think a lot of people think about that type of thing as, well, I just wasted so much time starting to write a book and then not finishing it. And like, yeah, it's not the most productive thing ever to start a ton of projects and not follow through with anything, but you can't think about that stuff as wasted time, because one, you learn so much through anything. Like if you try to start a new business, or you try to start a new side hustle or anything like that, even if you don't end up following through with that business and that specific business doesn't become your thing, you've learned so much along the way. You've learned new skills, you did more research, you met new people, you brought in your network. Like you learned so much that you might not even realize you can take to the next thing. I was reading this book a couple of months ago. It's called The Originals by Adam Grant, and it's a really good book if you are entrepreneurial or you want to start a business, or it's all about kind of like the idea that the originals are like very creative people that have put something like of success into the world. So like the founder of Microsoft, like, you know what I mean? Just like very innovative people, right? And in the book, they talked about how original people that go on to do something super successful, super creative, like the best artists in the world or the best authors in the world, they're not necessarily the people that just like have the best ideas. A lot of them have just put out the most quantity of work. So they've tried the most things. If it's an artist like Picasso or something, Picasso had one or two like really amazing paintings, but he also had 500 paintings that no one ever looked at. And that could be considered wasted time. So, kind of where I'm getting at this is try absolutely everything. If you have an idea and you want to execute on it, just go execute on it. I feel like a lot of advice is like, oh, vet all of your ideas before you start doing anything. Like, no, just do it. You have so much time, so much free time in your 20s because you don't have a family, you're not settled down. Just go try it. And then if it doesn't work, you learned so much in the process.
I need to, first of all, I need to read this book. I'm literally going to add it to my Goodreads on my phone after I say this. But there's a quote that says, action creates clarity faster than thinking ever will. And I love that because it says kind of the same thing where it's like, you are going to get clarity about whether or not you enjoy something, like by doing it. And then also the idea of, what is it called? The sunken cost fallacy or the sunk cost fallacy. But basically the idea that like, if you get to a point where you've put the time in and like maybe nothing's happened, like you've already put the time in, you're not going to get the time back. So either like let it go or finish it out. Like we've had conversations about this before too. Like there are a million projects that each of us have started that like we start to do and then we're like, wait, I don't actually like this. And then it's just like, okay, well, then I'm not going to do it because I gave it a shot to see how it went. And I realized I didn't enjoy it. But if it's something that I'm starting and then I do really enjoy it, then it's like, okay, well, great, then it works. But like, yeah, you have to invest at least try, give it a try, put the time in to be able to see if you actually enjoy it. And some things are going to take reps to actually see anything happen. You know what I mean? Like with our social media, it's not like we posted one video and then boom, like we are making money from social media. There are so many videos that never even saw the light of day that I never posted because I was just like, hell no, those are cringy and like that was a nope. But like that's how you get better at doing what you do. And that really is like, you should treat your 20s like a playground. Like just like try a bunch of things and like have fun and just like, yeah. I mean, obviously some
Especially
people
today
have
when
different circumstances, but yeah.
Yeah, especially today when the barrier to entry for a lot of these things is so low. Like, obviously, if you get an idea today to go start a business that's going to cost you $50,000 to start,
Yeah.
like maybe think about that a little
Perhaps
bit.
not,
But
yeah.
a lot of things are free to get started on, to at least like get started and see if it's something that you want to invest potentially money in down the line. But I just feel like people think of it as wasted time if they don't know if they're going to follow through with it. But at the end of the day, I think we were talking about this in the last episode, that time is going to pass regardless. So if you have an idea and you wait a year to get started on the idea because you don't want to waste time, you just wasted time by not doing anything.
Right.
So
Yeah.
think about it that
Yeah.
way. Like the time is going to pass regardless.
Yeah. Like, would you rather be a year down the line with clarity, whether it worked or didn't? Would you rather have the clarity about that? Or would you rather be still in that place sitting, wondering like whether you would want to do it? Yeah. I need to read that book. I'm going to add it on my Goodreads. Okay. The second one on my list is, and some people might have heard this before, but it's a lesson that everyone around you is going through life for the first time too. Remember that you are also going through life for the first time too. I think I've mentioned like a little bit on my social media, but I really haven't talked about it that much at all because it feels like one of those like, I mean, I'm a very like open person, but if this feels like vulnerable to share, but my relationship with, I'll just say some of my family, I'm not going to like specify who, but some of my family has not always been as good as it is now. Like I have had a complicated relationship with some family members. And one of the things that really helped me in like healing that relationship, because there were no unforgivable things that happened. I want to make that clear. Like this does not excuse like truly wrong behavior. And I don't want people to think that that's what I'm saying. But I think realizing that this family member had gone Like, I'm like, this is the first time they're going through life too. And like, they are trying their best and they are doing their best. Like, I truly believed that like they were giving it their best effort. And when I really thought about like everything that, you know, I mean, there's more than one family member, but everything these people had gone through, it was like, you know what? Like, I can't fathom what that was like growing up in the environment they grew up in, growing up in just the time that they grew up in, and trying to then like be involved in their family's lives. I'm trying to keep this broad so I don't like give away who I'm talking about. But you know what I mean? Like, I realized I was like, wow, like I think especially when it comes to people like parents or like any sort of authority figure, bosses, older friends, like things like that, sometimes we look to them as like, oh my gosh, they should have all the answers and they should know. And like, you know, it's like, how did they make that mistake? Like, how did they know better? Like, why did they say that to me? Like, why didn't they say this better or whatever? And realizing that like the other people are going through life for the first time too, it's like a duh. But at the same time, it was such a like, it clicked so much in my head where I was like, the same way that like a couple months ago, maybe I worded something in a way that I was like, well, I could have worded that better. Or, you know, like I've made all my fair share of mistakes. Like, they're being put in these situations where they're learning how to actively handle these things for the first time. Like, your boss or manager, that could be their very first time ever managing a team. And they're like actively trying to figure it out as they go. Or like your parents, like, yeah, when your parents like had you, like that was their first time being a parent. You know what I mean? Like it's just a weird thing. Or like when you're a teenager and your parents are parenting you as a teenager, it's like that is their first time. I mean, potentially, right? For my parents, it was their first time parenting a teenager. Or when I'm now 25. This is my parents' first time parenting a 25-year-old and a 29-year-old or 28-year-old at the same time. Like, my parents have never had kids that are 25 and 28 because my brother and I just got to 25 and 28. Like, and you think about it, it's like they're figuring out how to deal with all of those things literally at the same time that you're figuring out how to deal with all the things that are going on in your life. And I think for a while, I kind of like harbored resentment around certain people in my life that I felt like maybe they didn't handle something perfectly or they could have handled something better. And I wish it had been different. And you can have that forgiveness for somebody because you realize they're going through life for the first time, and you can also still feel frustrated and sad that it went the way it did. And that was something that I think I also had to like work through in therapy, but it was very healing to me to like release some of that resentment, to be like, you know what, like there are people in my life who have done things I do feel are unforgivable and I like don't talk to them anymore or whatever, including family. And there are people in my life that have done things that I'm like, I wish that you handled this differently because it really impacted me the way that you did handle it. But I can look at it now and recognize that you're going through life for the first time too. You did your best. You had no idea how else to handle that situation. And I can forgive you for that and like move on and allow myself to work through those like emotions and heal that relationship. And that's been like a big lesson for me also in forgiveness of things that are even just smaller. Like, you know, just for example, like I'll see like moms out in public with like little toddlers, right? Like I used to be a preschool teacher and I'm very like gentle parent style was kind of like my style as a preschool teacher. Sometimes I'll see like parents out in public and they'll just like really like scold their kid, like yell at their kid. And it really, it like kind of makes me feel really uncomfortable. But then I sometimes remember I'm like, they're going through this for the first time. You know what I mean? Like this could be the first meltdown in Target. This could be like whatever. Or I'll see like a teenager like driving, or someone will cut me off when I'm driving. And in my head, I used to be like, well, what the hell? But then I'd be like, you know what? Maybe I'm like, maybe they're not in this area. Maybe they've never driven in this area before and this is their first time driving here. Or maybe they're a teenager and they're learning how to drive. Or maybe they're elderly and they're learning how to drive, or like whatever, or not learning how to drive, but like trying to remember how to drive when they're elderly. But you know what I mean? I'm like, this is everybody's first time going through life and nobody's going to handle it perfectly. And like those small things, like, yes, it's fair to say, yes, they impact me and I'm going to like work through those feelings and whatever, but also like freeing yourself from any of that resentment by realizing people are going through life at the same time is like very, very freeing and has been a very healing thing for me to realize the past couple of years.
Yeah, definitely. And then on the flip side of that, kind of like bringing that inward and remembering like how you can act
Mm-hmm.
in certain relationships. Like if you are the authority figure, reminding people that like, hey, I am not an expert here. I don't know everything there is to know about parenting or managing or whatever the
Mm-hmm.
circumstances. Or like, I think relationships is a big one for this too. You know, if you get into a serious
Mm-hmm.
relationship and like you're kind of reminding your partner, hey, I don't know how to kind of navigate this. Maybe this is the first time going through a serious relationship, a long distance relationship. Maybe this is you guys get engaged and it's the first time you're going through an engagement situation. Kind of like reminding your partner, hey, there are going to be things that we're going to need to kind of like figure out together, and it's you and I versus the problem kind of thing. So yeah, love that tip. I can see how that would be very freeing. The next one on my list is it takes much less energy to do the thing than to stress about how the thing isn't done. And this has been so big for me in the last year. I feel like I've learned a lot about like time management and productivity. So I'm obviously coming at this from more of like a work space, but I feel like I used to just sit for so long, like making the endless to-do list and then staring at my to-do list being like, oh my gosh, I do not want to do anything on this list. Like I was the person that would like make a to-do list just to like make another to-do list, and then nothing would actually like get crossed off of my
Mm-hmm.
list, and I would spend 3 hours of my day just staring at my to-do list. But just kind of like taking the approach that, okay, I'm going to spend 2 seconds making a list, but then like if I don't cross off the first three things on this list, then it is so useless for me to continue making a 10 item to-do list because I didn't even cross off my first three. And just kind of like remembering that, again, like the stuff on the list doesn't take that much time. So you stressing about how it isn't done, like that's going to suck your energy so much more than to just be like, okay, let's cross the things off of the list and then I'm going to feel really good. I'm going to feel really accomplished. I heard a quote a while ago that said confidence comes from doing the things that
Mm-hmm.
you say you're going to do. And I think that really stuck with me. I also heard another thing, I think I heard this on a podcast too, where the girl was saying that when she gets into spurts of feeling like she's very unproductive or she's staring at her to-do list and not able to cross anything off because she's just like, oh my gosh, like I'm overwhelmed and I don't know where to start and all of those things, she focuses on how good it feels to lay down in bed at night and be like, oh my gosh, like I accomplished every single thing that I said I was going to do today, and how good is that feeling? And focusing on that like definitely helps me, because again, the stuff on your to-do list, like I obviously jobs are different and like some people's jobs are like physically a lot harder if you had to work in manual labor, any of those things, but for a lot of us, the things on our to-do list are usually not that hard and a lot of them take literally 10 minutes. So yeah, just focusing on how good it's going to feel when you actually cross the things off of the list instead of just stressing about how you didn't get anything done.
I love that quote about like confidence comes from, I forget how, like basically showing up for yourself and doing the things that you say you're gonna
Mm-hmm.
do. And that's been like a huge learning for me this year as well, especially with just like there, it is so powerful to be like, for earlier example, oh my God, I whenever I like get on a roll, my brain like combines all of my words into one because my
I do
brain
that
moves
too.
faster than my mouth. Like my brain just goes so fast, my mouth can't keep up. But I was gonna say, before I went on vacation to Aruba in June, I did like a version of the 75 soft. I kind of tweaked it a little bit to make it harder for myself because a lot of the things in the 75 soft I was already doing. But there was something so powerful in being like, oh yeah, like I am doing like a 75-day health challenge right now. So like I'm not drinking right now. Or I like to look back at that health challenge and be like, I read my book every single day of that challenge except for like one day when I had like a killer migraine and decided to just like go to bed. Like being like, yeah, be able to say like, yeah, I was consistent this entire time. Like I did the damn thing. Like I showed up for myself every single day of that challenge. That was so empowering and that gave so much confidence too. And I don't know, I feel like, yeah, when you make that like to-do list, being like, I'm actually gonna like do the things that I say I'm going to do is it's such like a bad bitch move. Do you know what I mean? To be like, hell yeah, like I did what, I don't know. I that's why I love that quote. I feel like also a
Yeah.
lot of it comes from like the initial friction. Like there's friction in getting yourself to do something where it's like, oh, like I have to send this email and it's like, I don't want to do that. But then when you actually do it and you're like in motion, it's not bad. There's like a, what is that? It's like, I don't, is it Newton's law or something? I don't know. I feel like I haven't
Oh,
talked about
it's
this
like
since like
energy
high
in
school.
motion stays in motion.
Yeah, like it
Yeah.
stays in motion. And that's how I feel where I'm like, once I actually, like, because I'll have a to-do list where I'm like, oh, I don't want to do any of this. And then once I actually get going, then I feel like I have that like movement and it keeps
Mhm.
going. But I have one on my list. It's a couple down, not technically my next one, but it's kind of related to this. So I wanted to share it. And it's that you won't always be motivated to do things. Sometimes you just have to be disciplined. And I struggled with this before because I really try to like listen to my body and listen to like, especially when it comes to exercise. I think some people are just like, get in the gym and whatever. And I'm like, okay, some days, like, if I really didn't sleep well or like if I was glutened or whatever, sometimes I'm just like, no, I'm not going to push myself to go to the gym because I'm not going to drive my body into the ground simply because I like, you know what I mean? The people who are like super all or nothing and
Yes,
it's like really
definitely.
intense and unhealthy.
Which is not good for
But
you. Yeah,
no,
take your
no,
rest days.
right. Yeah, it's not good for you. But I will say, like, some days, so I try to do 1 hour of movement every day. It can be any form of movement. And I prefer like low impact. So I'll like go for a walk. Running is actually fine. I consider running low impact, but I know some people because I run slow. I'm not out here like Usain Bolt. But I will like go for a run or a walk, or I'll go to like a mat Pilates class or something. It just has to be any form of movement. And I find that some days, like today is one, I'm exhausted. I just came back from a trip to San Diego. I feel like a literal zombie version of myself. But I'm like, I know that like once I pull out my walking pad and I start walking, I'm going to be like, I will walk. I did this yesterday. Yesterday, I also didn't want to like move my body. And I was like, oh, I'm so tired from this trip. And I was like, you know what? Sometimes you just have to be like, I'm just going to do the damn thing. So I pull out my little walking pad, put my standing desk up, and I walked for like 85 minutes, like almost an hour and a half. And great, I did the damn thing. I get to check that off on my, like, because I'm doing the 75-day health challenge again. I get to check that off. And I wasn't motivated to do it. I didn't want to do the thing, but I was like, I'm just going to pull the treadmill out and just freaking do it. Or if I'm like, oh, I'm going to go for a walk, I'm like, okay, I will give myself 3 seconds to decide. And I think I mentioned this in a previous episode, but sometimes it'll just be like, okay, 3, 2, 1, we're doing it. And I'll just make a choice. Put the sneakers on, get my butt outside and start walking. And then once I've started walking, time flies by and I'm like, whatever. Okay, now I'm so glad that I did the thing. But like, you're not always going to be motivated to do things. And sometimes you just have to be disciplined and like get it done, because that's like some things, that's just how life is. And some things you can't outsource. Can't outsource my walk to somebody else when I'm having a day where I just really want to take a nap. But I think like finding that balance between like, you know, just being disciplined and being motivated is helpful.
Yeah, no, that's such a good tip. Like, I think kind of making that distinction there too, because I'm the same way. I'm like, okay, I need to like at least move my body every single day, but I'm kind of like, I have an advantage because I have a dog, so I physically
Mm.
have to move my body every single day. Like on the days that I want to rot in bed, Bella says, no, mom, I still have to pee. So I feel like right now, like my morning routine is literally just I pop out of bed, I brush my teeth, I wash my face, I put her leash on her, and I go for a walk. Like I literally
Mhm.
leave my tennis shoes at the edge of my bed. I have a little like workout set that I put on first thing in the morning, and then I take her on a walk. And some days the walk is shorter than others, but I'm kind of the same way. I feel like once I get moving, even if I'm having
Mhm.
a day where I'm pretty low energy, I'm like, well, I'm already out here. And then you sort of like just
Mhm.
feel good and you continue to walk until she like is ready to go home.
Yeah.
But definitely on the gym part too, it's like there are definitely days where I'm like, oh my gosh, it sounds so terrible to drive myself to the gym and go work out right now. And there are some days where it's like, no, that's me saying that my body needs a rest day. But there's other
Mhm.
days where it's like, no, I just need to have that discipline because I'm not feeling the most motivated right now. I have to say, one thing for me that's really helped with this is learning a lot more of, if you're on hormonal birth control, this won't really apply, but I'm not on hormonal birth control. So I've done a lot better recently about like cycle syncing my workouts. We can do an entire episode on
I
this
was
too,
gonna
like
say we
learning about
should,
like
yeah.
your hormonal cycle. Maybe we'll bring someone on because obviously I'm not like an expert in it or anything, but you're during different phases of the month, you naturally have more energy than others. So, depending on what phase of my cycle I'm in, I know that I like right now I'm in a super high energy week, but I know that next week I might be lower energy because I'll be going into my luteal phase and then going into like my menstrual phase. So, it's just kind of like understanding that too and being like, okay, if I'm having a low energy day, like that's fine. I can take it easy. I can just go for a walk today. I don't need to kill myself in the gym over nothing when I'm just like really really not feeling it. So that has definitely been helping me as well. Okay, so the last one on my list, because we are about out of time, we'll end on kind of like a money related one too. I think we did this last episode since this is the Girls Talk Money podcast. The last one on my list is you'll spend a lot of time and money if you don't learn to manage your FOMO. And I feel like I've been talking about this a lot recently, and I know we've talked about it in a couple of podcast episodes, but not spending your money and your time is like definitely an important resource here too, but not spending your time and money on things that you don't value out of fear of missing out, that frees up so much more room in your budget to spend freely and spend guilt-free on the things that actually bring you joy and things that you actually value. And I think here, like, learning what those values are, learning how to kind of like spend your money based on what you value and what brings you fulfillment in your life is so important. And like, it becomes a lot easier and better to manage your money when you do decide like, hey, I'm going to spend on these things because these things actually improve my life, but these are the areas where I'm spending because I feel like I'm going to miss out if I don't go to the bar tonight, or I'm going to miss out if I don't go on that girls trip even though it's not even a destination that I want to go to. Or I feel like weddings are a big one for this. Like, a lot of people kind of have the fear of missing out, of not having a big wedding, but then they have the big wedding and then they're like, oh my gosh, I regret spending $75,000 on one day, kind of thing. So again, just like realizing what your values are and how you want to spend, it frees up so much more room in your budget.
I feel like we've talked about this before when it comes to fashion and makeup as well, because I feel like so many people spend so much on clothing because of like FOMO. They're like, oh my gosh, I want to be on trend. I want to have all the trendy things. And then trends obviously come and go. So unless you like really love that trend, it's like, does that really bring you joy? But also, like, if you like, yeah, if that is something that brings you joy, okay, like, yeah, enjoy it, spend money on it, but then be okay not spending money on things that really don't bring you joy. And I feel like that goes back to really knowing yourself well and knowing what you genuinely care about and what you really don't. And like at what price you value that, like I've talked about before, like I'm not like a big drinker, and if I go somewhere and like the drinks are all like $25, like I'm just like, no, like I don't value a drink at $25. But if there's like a drink that's like 12, I'm like, okay, maybe, like, because I value it at that much, but I'm not just gonna like buy something just because like I'm the only one at the table without a drink, kind of thing. And I think that goes for so many things. Like, I don't know. Yeah, just that
Yeah,
FOMO definitely can and like travel, because I feel like a lot of people, which I didn't realize this until like last year, but because like people post about travel online and people are like, "Oh my gosh, I want to look cool and like travel." So many people put vacations on their credit card, and I'm like, "Whoa, like that's going to cost you so much money in the long run." All because like you feel like a lot of other people in their 20s are traveling more than you and you don't want to feel that FOMO. Um there's so many areas where like this whole FOMO
yeah.
thing really comes into play and really impacts your money.
Definitely. Well, I think that brings us to the end of this week's episode of the Girls Talk Money podcast. This was a really fun one. And let us know in Spotify what some of your kind of like life lessons that you've learned are. We love doing episodes like this. I feel like we are not even close to 25 yet. We might honestly
No.
only be halfway. We only got through 5 in this episode. So we can continue to do these, and maybe we can make them a little bit more specific, like life lessons we've learned about friendship or dating or a money related one or something like that. So let us know in Spotify what you want to see. You can also DM us on Instagram at Girls Talk Money Pod. We love hearing from you guys. So leave any questions or feedback for the podcast in Spotify or on Instagram. But as always, thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of the Girls Talk Money podcast. And until next week.